Hi, my name's Andy, and this is the Power 2 Pod.
And I'm Jason.
And this is going to be our week 2 in review episode where we kind of go over what happened in week 2 in college football in the Big Ten and the SEC. Let's get started with the game of the week, the Texas-Michigan game, which didn't exactly turn out to be the game of the week. But nonetheless, it was, number 3 Texas versus number 10 Michigan, and was supposed to be, like we said, the game of the week. Just looking at the stats and, watching the game, I think one of the big things was, besides Michigan's quarterback struggles, was third downs for both teams kind of decided this game. If you look, Michigan was only 3 for 12 on third down. So, their offense couldn't stay on the field. A lot of that had to do with quarterback play and the inability to run the ball. Even with Donovan Edwards, he couldn't get going. Davis Warren struggled. They could not sustain drives. And then if you look on the flip side, Texas was 10 for 16 on third down. That's an amazing conversion rate. They extended drives, put the ball in the end zone, and came away with the 31-12 win.
Yeah, Michigan's defense definitely was gassed. They were on the field a lot that game, especially with all the third down conversions made by Texas. Also, Texas just took advantage of the turnover battle. They had 3 turnovers altogether, and I think it ended up with 17 points for Texas. So that's the recipe to win in Ann Arbor in a hostile environment is create turnovers, convert third downs, stop them on third downs, and that's exactly what Texas did. Texas probably couldn't write up a better game plan for what had happened on Saturday. And they kind of showed the nation that they're ranked number 3 and they could be probably ranked higher, to be honest. That was quite the showing by Texas.
Yeah, I mean, it was just one of those things, where Michigan just never felt like it was in the game. You never got a glimpse of like, yeah, they can go toe to toe with Texas. Like that never came to fruition. It was dominated by Texas all game. Quinn Ewers comes out, plays pretty much flawless as you could against a defense of that magnitude. He had 246 yards, 3 touchdowns. He was 24 for 36. So he was efficient. He just got the job done. Texas was also able to get the running game going, which was surprising because Michigan's defense is super strong in that front seven. They were able to get 143 yards rushing. Just everything was working for Texas. And the opposite of that, nothing was working for Michigan. You had, like we said, Davis Warren's under a lot of scrutiny right now. There's a reason why not a whole lot of walk-on quarterbacks start for big programs. It happens, but not very often, and this is kind of why. Usually you're a walk-on for a reason, and you don't have the top-end talent like Quinn Ewers. There's a reason Quinn Ewers was a 5-star quarterback, and he kind of showed the discrepancy between a 5-star quarterback and a walk-on.
Yeah, in today's football, the quarterback is the number one priority for every team that's playing out there, and you see it with Texas being such a huge team. They have Ewers, who's a 5-star quarterback, but look at who's next in line. Arch Manning is just sitting there waiting for his opportunity. Another 5-star recruit sitting behind him. Now Michigan doesn't seem to have a 5-star recruit with all the quarterbacks combined. Like I said, they're showing that Alex Orji, they have no confidence in him. Davis Warren is struggling. They have Jaden Davis, who they just recruited, who's a freshman. Maybe if they keep struggling, you might see him early. I don't think so. I think they're going to kind of stick with Orji and Warren. But yeah, it just shows the importance of having a good quarterback and a seasoned quarterback.
Yeah, and then, just another thing that's kind of puzzling is Donovan Edwards. Michigan fans are going on and on about how this was his year and he could be a Heisman candidate just like Blake Corum was. And through 2 games, I mean, the guy's just not there. Against Fresno State, and Texas is a little better than Fresno State, but he's just not making any plays. So does that mean the offensive line's taking a step back? That's definitely a possibility with Michigan losing what they did. And they didn't exactly hit the transfer portal as hard as they did last year. And they also don't have the amount of seniors they had last year in that championship season. I mean, they were probably the oldest team in the NCAA last year, without a doubt. They were full of COVID year seniors and fifth year seniors, sixth year seniors. They were loaded with older guys. And I think you're seeing, the combination of the offensive line taking a step back, the quarterback play taking a giant leap backwards. From J.J. McCarthy to Davis Ward, it's night and day. And then you're not having that playmaker on the ground to erase any issues with the quarterback or offensive line. They don't have the quorum where you can squeeze through a hole and get you 10, 15 yards. So it's kind of a turning point for Michigan, I feel like. Like, where do you go from here? I know, the schedule lightens up a little bit. Next week, they get Arkansas State. But the week after, they got USC. So, I mean, things could go sideways pretty quickly here in Sharon Moore's, first season at the helm of the Wolverines.
Yeah, for sure. And I do think the offensive line took a little bit step back from last year. To me, Donovan Edwards has always kind of been either a home run or strikeout type running back. He's either going to break it big and make these huge plays, or he's just not going to find the holes and he's not going to get any opening. I feel like a more consistent running back right now is Mullins out of that backfield, and I think you can expect to keep seeing more and more of him as the season goes on. Hopefully they have a good bounce-back game and show that the offense can score at will against Arkansas State. But if USC's defense is revamped at least enough to stop Michigan's offense, I definitely think that USC might have the upper edge in that game right now.
Yeah, I think going forward, unless something changes, Michigan's going to struggle with any team that has an offense. So you look at USC, Ohio State, Oregon, they're all on the schedule, and they all have dynamic offenses. So, I mean, for Wolverines fans, hopefully they figure something out here, and they're able to, straighten things out and get things better. I think this game was more about the Wolverines struggling more so than how good Texas is. I feel like Texas just came out, got the job done, and Michigan you could see Michigan's flaws more so than Texas's strength.
Yeah, for sure. I think we're gonna move on to recapping some of the other games and the conferences here. I can start it off with I will recap the Georgia game. They played Tennessee Tech, so I mean, not a whole lot to take away from it. But Carson Beck, who's a Heisman candidate, put up 5 touchdowns, looked really good. Trevor Etienne has his Georgia debut as he was suspended for the Clemson game. He had a really good game, but I really like what I'm seeing from Nate Frazier, who's technically like the 3rd string or 4th string running back, but we've seen him in Clemson and we've seen him against Tennessee Tech, and I really like what I'm seeing with him. And then obviously our receivers, we had like 28 receivers catch balls against Tennessee Tech, so I'm not going to go through every single one, but as expected, Georgia rolled them. They won by 45. They look good, so hopefully they can get really tuned in, so when they have to go to Austin, Texas in a couple weeks, it'll be a great game.
Yeah, then moving on to my team, Penn State, kind of had a heart attack game scare. Coming off a big emotional win at West Virginia. Defense just came out flat like we haven't seen in years. Bowling Green would not be stopped in the first half. I mean, 225 yards passing, just tore up the defense in the first half. Second half, Tom Allen finally made the adjustments, and I think Bowling Green had 86 total yards in the second half. They had 2 turnovers in the second half. Penn State's defense is predicated on pressure. If they're getting pressure, the defense is good. That's just how they're built. They're going to play man coverage, and they're going to get after the quarterback. If they get after the quarterback, they're going to have a good game. Couldn't get after the quarterback in the first half. Had a little bit more success in the second half. The offense looked good, not as good as it did against West Virginia. We got more questions about the wide receiver room. I mean, we only had 2 receivers catch a ball. Omari Evans and Fleming got a catch. So, once again, I mean, Tyler Warren, put the receiving core on his back as the tight end. And once again, we have kind of what's the receiver room doing. But, at the end of the day, It's hard to win in college football. They got to win. It's early in the year. They get a bye week, Kent State, and then they go into the Big Ten slate with Illinois. So got out with a win, and that's pretty much the biggest positive, unlike some other teams in the country.
Yeah, and that's what matters is that they were able to secure the win. It to me, if you compare it, oh, Georgia won by 45 against this team, and Penn State, only won by a touchdown or whatever it was. To me, it doesn't really much matter. Like a win's a win, and if you blow them out, you blow them out. If you don't, you don't. I don't think it takes in too much consideration unless you lose, like Notre Dame did to Northern Illinois. So, my next team would be the Arkansas. They traveled to Oklahoma State, who was ranked 16th, I think, this last week. They definitely showed a lot. Their offense was really good. I think they kind of found their answer with Taylor Green. He's a big-bodied quarterback. He can chuck it. He can run. He just had a really good game. They put up 31 points. They pushed the game into 2 overtimes. I think that Arkansas can definitely put together an improved season from what we've seen from the Sam Pittman era. This may be his best year because maybe he figured out his quarterback, which was a transfer from Boise State, I believe. So I think that was definitely the answer for Arkansas this last week.
Yeah, it's good to see Arkansas playing good again. My next game is going to be a rivalry game, the Iowa State-Iowa game, where, let's face it, Iowa kind of choked it away. They were up 19-7 with that defense that they're always have. You're thinking, just run out the clock, go home with an ugly 19-14 win or whatever. Iowa State comes back from down 19-7, scores 13 points unanswered and comes off with the pretty much a walk-off field goal, 54-yarder to beat the Hawkeyes. And the Hawkeyes have the same issues we're always talking about. If you look at Cade McNamara, not a good game from him, 13-29, under 50% completion rating, only 99 yards. That's, 3.5 yards per catch, 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, just the same. The more things change, the more they stay the same for Iowa. If they can just score 24 points a game, they'd be one of the better teams in the country.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving on to my next team would be Auburn. They took kind of a shocking loss to Cal. They lost 14-21. At some point, you got to think that Peyton Thorne is just not that guy. And you got to try something different. I mean, he went 14 for 27 with 4 interceptions. I don't care who you play. If you give up the ball 4 times, you're most likely not going to win. And, it's a lot what we've seen last year. So it's just like, I can't believe that Hugh Freeze, the offensive-minded guy that he is, cannot get a quarterback transfer or recruit that can play better than Peyton Thorne. So that was just eye-opening to me. I thought when Hugh Freeze took this Auburn job, I thought he was going to kind of revamp this program, get it back to relevancy. And with his quarterback play of Peyton Thorne, it's not happening anytime soon. I think that was a tough loss for Auburn last week.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, we've seen Peyton Thorne at Michigan State. We've seen he's not a world beater. So it's kind of like, what else do you have in the chamber if it comes to Auburn? I mean, he's just not the guy that can play big-time college football and win you games. Moving on to the next game over here in the Big Ten, I have the back-and-forth game between Michigan State and Maryland, where Michigan State went on the road, improved to 2-0, beat a Maryland team that, had some expectations this year. Michigan State really showed out with kind of their youth movement. They have one of the youngest quarterbacks and wide receivers, especially in the Power 5. Aiden Childs. I mean, he's got to work on the turnovers. He had 3 interceptions. So, I mean, he's got to work on the turnovers, but he's electric. He makes plays, and he can be a game changer. I mean, he had 363 yards passing, 3 touchdowns to go along those 3 interceptions, and he has a new favorite target with Nick Marsh, the true freshman. 8 catches, 194 yards, touchdown. just getting behind the Maryland defense. If you're looking for the Maryland standpoint, I mean, it's kind of a big disappointment. Michigan was predicted this year to not make a bowl game. And for Maryland, I mean, making the bowl game is kind of the goal. And they had expectations with the new era with Tua's brother gone. Billy Edwards is supposed to be the next guy in line. I mean, he looked fine. But if you're looking just being Maryland, these are the type of games you have to win to get to the next level and make bowl eligibility.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely thought Maryland was going to come with the win on Saturday, but to me, the biggest advantage that Michigan State has is actually on the defensive end. I feel like they played really aggressive against Florida Atlantic on their season opener, and they played Maryland tough. And I think that defense is really going to keep them in a lot of games and give their offense an opportunity to win games. But yeah, I'm very surprised on how that defense has came together. Moving forward for my next game in the SEC will be for Tennessee. They traveled down to North Carolina State. They ended up winning 51-10. Nico looked really good again. He went 16 for 23 with like 211 yards, 2 touchdowns. He still did throw 2 interceptions, so that's gonna be the kind of his biggest thing this year is, being able to not turn over the ball, being a young quarterback and not having a lot of experience before this year. He's got to learn to make those smart decisions and stuff like that. But again, Josh Heupel's offense is always going to be driven by passing passing it downfield and just creativity within the offensive schemes and a lot of motion. So Tennessee, like I said, they're a road favorite, and then they just blew them out. So I think that was a really big showing for Tennessee there.
Yeah, and then, the ACC just takes another hit with another team getting a loss, especially out of conference. Miami's kind of looking like their last hope for a actual playoff contender. Not just to get in, but to win a game. Miami's looking like the only one in the ACC right now. Moving on, my next game in the Big Ten I'm going to highlight here is the Illinois-Kansas game, where the Big Ten came away with a ranked victory over a Big 12 team. If you look at it, it was Illinois football. They got a defensive touchdown. They stifled Kansas with their defense, made just enough plays on offense. Luke Altmaier, he makes some big throws. I mean, the stats weren't super impressive. He only had 192 yards passing, but he makes some big throws. And you got Zachariah Franklin over there and Pat Bryant, who reeled off a few big plays there. And Illinois scores the last 10 points of the game and wins 23-17 over a ranked Kansas team.
Yeah, like I said, and again, Illinois shows that they can develop good corners and their defense is tough. So they're always hard to play, especially at home. Moving on, Oklahoma is my next team that we're going to recap. And they struggled. They played Houston, which Houston is not a good team this year. They're projected in the bottom 3 of the Big 12. And Oklahoma squeaked out a win, 16-12. But Jackson Arnold did not look great. He went 19 for 32 with only 174 yards. He had a couple touchdown throws and an interception. But Oklahoma's defense looks all right. Obviously, with Brett Venables as their head coach is kind of always expected. But yeah, their offense has got to get some answers, and they got to get them quick. Especially when SEC play is going to start coming up here in a couple weeks. 16 points isn't going to cut it. And I know Jackson Arnold had high expectations coming in that he was going to be their guy. And I just think he's struggling. He's struggling in that offense. So, yeah, that was definitely surprising to see them struggle and not put up points like we usually see Oklahoma do.
Yeah, and I've never been a big Jackson Arnold guy. I've never really seen the hype. I'm not saying I'm out here scouting people and, I know, but I've just never got it with him. I've never seen, I'm also an Oklahoma hater. They're just one of the teams I don't like, but I've just never seen it with him, and it was kind of a weird performance against a Houston team that struggled in week 1. My next game here, I'm going with the nightcap here, Nebraska against Colorado. Big game for the Big Ten. Couldn't really drop that game, especially with Nebraska. Kind of dark horse to make the playoffs here if they continue to get better. Schedule lines up for them. That's the thing with the big expanded conferences now. You're going to have some teams that just have a cake conference schedule, and if they make the best of it, they're going to sneak into the playoff. Nebraska really exposed Colorado's weaknesses on the offensive line, held them to 16 yards rushing, and were over Shadur all game. Never let him really have time in the pocket. Travis Hunter got his, but besides that, Nebraska just dominated this game. They got out to the 28-0 lead at halftime. Got a pick six against Shadur and never really looked back. They just kind of ran out the clock, played it safe second half. Came away with victory 28-10. Just a dominant performance against a team that doesn't necessarily look that great right now.
Yeah, kind of the same mantra as last year. They don't have the offensive line to protect Shadur when they're passing it 40, 50 times a game. And it just doesn't calculate to a lot of wins when you come down to these good teams that can play defense, and you're not going to beat them over the top. And like you said, when you can't run consistently, it's just going to be a bad day. And like you said, your quarterback's going to end up getting hurt or just beat up. So that's exactly what happened. Moving on to my last team, we're going to visit the Alabama USF game. Alabama struggled all the way up until the fourth quarter. This was a close game against USF, and a lot of it had to do with turnovers and penalties. And that's two of the biggest things that you don't normally see from an Alabama team. Usually they're one of the most disciplined teams. With the new coaching change there, you kind of see the holes of discipline and that scheme, that Nick Saban scheme of preparation. And it took advantage of them. And like I said, I know they had one huge holding call that brought back a touchdown, but Milroe, he went 16 for 26 with 194 yards. And then one of the players that really caught my eye was this Ryan Williams. He is a 17-year-old wide receiver. He ended up taking 4 catches for 68 yards and a touchdown. So that kid looks electric. I think he'll definitely keep seeing his name more and more as the season goes. But there's a lot of questions going on with the Alabama team, and then now they struggle against USF. Well, now they travel up north to Wisconsin, which Wisconsin's above average team, but they really haven't kind of broke through with the Luke Fickell era yet. So, but it's going to be a hostile environment, Big Ten SEC game next week. So, Alabama better focus in and hone in all those penalties, or like you said, they might have a rough day up in Wisconsin.
Yeah, for sure. Big game between the Big Ten and SEC this week with Alabama and Wisconsin coming up. My last game I'm going to highlight here in the Big Ten for week 2 is going to be the Oregon-Boise State game. Oregon came in, kind of on upset alert after their performance against Idaho State, and rightfully so, turns out. Oregon ended up scoring the last 10 points of the game and walking off this game with a walk-off 25-yard field goal. It's kind of weird to see Oregon coming out struggling against Idaho State and Boise State, but it's also speaking to you bring a ton of transfers in. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes it just takes more time for it to gel and all come together. Like, hopefully, for Oregon fans' sake, it's going to improve every week, and this isn't an actual, weakness. They're giving up a ton of rushing yards, they're having some turnovers. Penalties. They had 9 penalties for 74 yards in this game. Couldn't really get the run game going with only 110 yards rushing. They really, struggled at, going up and down the field. You look, they only had 353 yards this game against Boise State. They had more than that last week and only scored 24 points. So I feel like Oregon's just in a weird place, and they're hoping, all these pieces come together and be what it's truly supposed to be.
Yeah, and I think that game kind of took more of an advantage for Boise State, even though they didn't come away with the win. they're, a power or a group of five favorite to make the playoffs. So for them to stay competitive and really put it to Oregon on the road, I think made a huge difference for them and kind of the rankings and how the nation sees Boise State. But a lot of Oregon, like you said, it's just a lot of transfers coming in, a lot of different schemes and what players aren't used to. And, Dylan Gabriel's one of those guys. He's bounced around to a couple teams now. It doesn't always just gel. So I think that's where you're kind of seeing the struggles. But I do, working it out, and they'll get better as the season goes. But I think they have to play Ohio State on their schedule, so that will definitely be a tough task about middle of the season.
Yeah, and that'll do it here for our week 2 review. Like, subscribe, and review. And like I said, look out for some of our daily content with our 3 and out content. Thanks for watching. Like I said, like, subscribe, and review, and we'll see you guys again.
Yep, see ya.